I'm Larry Walther. This is principlesofaccounting.com, Chapter 23, and in this first module we will consider variable costing versus absorption costing. Absorption costing is also known as full costing. The normal manufacturing costs are considered product cost and included in inventory. This includes material, labor, and all elements of factory overhead. As sales occur, the cost of inventory is transferred to cost of goods sold, which of course reduces gross profit. Importantly, selling, general, and administrative expenses are all classified as period expenses. None of the SG&A costs are traced or attributable to a product cost. Now, absorption costing is required under generally accepted accounting principles. And let's review this graphic. Here I'm showing that the product costs include those four key components: material, labor, variable and fixed manufacturing overhead, and the period cost are the variable SG&A as well as fixed SG&A costs. The rationale for absorption costing is that it causes a product to be measured and reported at its completed cost. Just because costs like fixed manufacturing overhead are difficult to identify with a particular unit of output does not mean they were not a cost of the unit of output. However, this approach does not always provide the best signal for management decision making, which gives rise to variable costing. Under variable costing, only variable production costs are assigned to inventory and cost of goods sold. The fixed manufacturing costs are regarded as period expenses along with SG&A. They're expensed in the period incurred no matter how much is produced. Under variable costing, or also known as direct costing, the product costs are only direct materials, direct labor, and variable manufacturing overhead. Those costs are variable in nature, hence the name variable costing. The period costs include all elements of SG&A, whether fixed or variable, and the fixed manufacturing overhead. Let's look at a variable costing example. Assume a company produces 10,000 units of a particular product. Per unit cost are $2 of direct materials, $3 for direct labor, and $4 for variable factory overhead. This business also incurs $10,000 of fixed overhead. Thus, under absorption costing, the product cost is calculated to be $10 per unit. That's the $9 for material, labor, and variable overhead, and $1 per unit for fixed factory overhead as shown, the $10,000 spread over the units. Under variable costing, however, the product cost is the $9 material, labor, and variable overhead. Now, let's assume that this company is approached to sell one additional unit of output at $9.50. This sale will not result in any added SG&A cost or otherwise impact other sales. If we were to base our evaluation on absorption costing, the additional unit appears to produce a loss of about 50 cents. It appears the correct decision is not to make the sale. To show how variable costing can improve the decision process, however, variable costing considers product cost to be only $9. A $9.50 sales price suggests a 50-cent marginal profit on additional unit of sales. If management was limited to absorption costing information, the opportunity would likely be lost. This problem is similar to that encountered with unsold seats on airlines or empty seats at sporting events or musical performances and things of that nature. There's very little additional cost of bringing in a customer to fill those vacant seats, so almost any revenue that's generated contributes to the overall profitability. However, there's traps that must be avoided in using this type of logic for deciding whether to accept an order or not. A business must ultimately recover the fixed cost, that is, all of the fixed cost of doing business. You can incrementally contribute toward covering that fixed cost, but may not have the capacity to meet it. So the total units sold must provide enough margin to meet this purpose. If a company offers special deals on a selective basis, also, regular customers can become alienated or themselves hold out for lower prices. Let's consider another advantage of variable cost analysis, and that is avoiding a downward business spiral decision process. For example, a company has three products, product A, B, and C, each being produced in equal proportion. Furthermore, the company is fully able to meet customer demand from existing capacity, and the company is not incurring any variable cost related to SG&A. Those are significant assumptions to illustrate this point. So here we have product A, direct material, direct labor, variable factory overhead, and our allocated fixed overhead produces a product cost of $16 a unit compared to the selling price of $15 a unit. Shows that we appear to be having a negative gross profit on that particular product. One might think, well, let's discontinue product A. Let's look closer at what happens. First of all, take note that the combined profitability of products A, B, and C is $7, Whereas, if we only produce products B and C, the analysis shows that combined profit is $6. We've reduced overall profit. Now that may seem inconsistent with the idea that we're losing $1 on product A. How then can we discontinue that product and actually lower profitability? We need to look at the total product cost. Product A is $16, product B is $12, and product C is $10. That includes an allocation of fixed overhead of $2 per unit for each product A, B, and C. That $6 of fixed factory overhead must be absorbed now by products B and C at $3 each if we discontinue product A. So we're not avoiding fixed overhead, we're spreading it over a smaller product pool. The selling price is unchanged, however, and so all things considered, we've actually reduced our overall profitability by doing away with product A. Variable costing would show products A, B, and C each to have a positive contribution margin to cover fixed overhead. And so we need to be very careful about jumping to the conclusion that a product that appears unprofitable using full costing or absorption costing should indeed be discontinued. Let's continue on and look at an income statement prepared under absorption costing, which is for external use, and a direct costing or variable costing income statement that's used only for internal use purposes. Now this example assumes that everything that's produced is sold, we have no inventory, we expect to have the same profitability overall, but we measure and report it a bit differently. First of all, our cost of goods sold includes material, labor, and variable overhead. Of the $450,000, $300,000 of that is shown as less variable product cost on the right, and the other $150,000 is presumed to be the fixed manufacturing overhead, which is charged against income but below the contribution margin in the variable costing income statement. We also need to consider our variable SG&A cost. The SG&A costs were subtracted from gross profit in arriving at our net income on the left. Our variable SG&A costs are subtracted from our variable manufacturing margin on the right, that is sales minus variable cost of production, gives us our variable manufacturing margin, from which we subtract our other variable expenses attributable to those sales, and we get our contribution margin as $337,500. Finally, our fixed SG&A is subtracted from gross profit on the left, it's subtracted from our contribution margin on the right, and we come up with the same net income. So it's an entirely different display of the information on an absorption costing basis versus on a variable costing basis. We do need to consider the impact of inventory. The following statements are going to be identical to what we just looked at, except I'm going to assume 10% of our production remains in inventory and is not sold. And so here now we have the sales at $675,000 instead of $750,000. That's that 10% reduction. Notice income is higher, $68,750, under absorption costing than it is under the variable costing approach. The key difference being the $150,000 of fixed factory overhead was all expensed under variable costing, but only 90% of it was included in the cost of goods sold. The other 10% would be assigned to inventory. 10% of $150,000 is $15,000. That explains our difference in income. It's how the cost is allocated. Is it allocated to inventory, or is it allocated all as a charge against income, as was the case under variable costing? Here is a graphic showing this effect. So we have our cost of production, material, labor, variable overhead, and fixed factory overhead. Notice that ending inventory captures part of each bucket there. In other words, there's 4 layers in that inventory. The rest is expensed as cost of goods sold. If we compare this to a variable costing approach, notice the difference. Our ending inventory only carries material, labor, and variable factory overhead. The fixed factory overhead, again on the far right, is expensed as incurred. Bear in mind that a reduction in inventory during a period will cause the opposite effect from that just shown. A portion of the contents of the beginning inventory cup would be transferred to expense, commensurate with the decrease in inventory. Since the inventory cup contains less under variable costing, expect expenses to be lower and income to be higher, again, when inventory is reducing during a period.